Hello and welcome to another episode on the Motherhood Circle video channel. I'm Ashley, I'm the host of this video series. I'm a pregnancy and postpartum doula from the Motherhood Circle. I'm really excited today to be interviewing one of my dear friends, Antonia from Peaceful Postnatal. Antonia shares some of her wisdom when it comes to self-care. We've all heard about self-care, but Antonia is the master when it comes to self-care. She not only preaches it, she actually practices it daily. And I know this because I'm in constant contact with her and often chat to her while she's hiking up a mountain. She shares so many simple and practical tips on how you can start taking some much needed time for yourself and how to fill up your cup. Antonia provides postnatal support and facilitates mother circles in Canberra, Australia. She empowers mothers to feel calm, confident and connected in their circle of support. I hope you really enjoy this episode. Let me know what you think and let me know what you've learned from this episode and what you're going to be implementing in your life. As I always say, grab a cup of tea, grab a cup of coffee, grab a cup of water, snuggle up on the couch and enjoy this episode. Hi Antonia, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm really excited to have you. You're a dear friend of mine and we always are talking about wonderful things and ways to support new mothers. So I'm glad to have you on here and share your wisdom. And today we're talking about self-care, which is one of my favorite topics. And we just did a group, well, basically we did a meditation just before we jumped on so we could relax ourselves and also nourish ourselves. So I'd love for you to share today what self-care is to you and what self-care is.
Hi, Ashley. Thanks. I'm really happy to be here. It's always just so nice to chat with you. I think of self-care as anything that fills your cup or lights you up. Some people talk about recharging your battery. I kind of don't love the term self-care. I think it's a bit problematic. To me, it always sounds a little bit prim and proper. And I think that's because it can encompass those really basic hygiene activities as well. Like sometimes when we talk about self-care, we're really just saying like, Ashley, did you brush your teeth today? Did you, wash your hair? And that's important, but it's not necessarily the type of self-care that we're talking about when we're really looking at how do you fill your cup? How do you nourish yourself? So if there is an expression that people like to use instead, go for it. I think self-care it's useful. It's very accurate. It's something that people usually understand. But I do think that it can be a little bit of a problematic term. And it also places the burden for that care on the self. Often when we're talking about self-care, yeah, it's caring for ourselves, but it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. We might need to ask for support from our partner or from a friend or from our community in order for that care to take place. So I think that's really important to remember. And the other thing that I want to say just right at the beginning here is that I believe that self-care is a necessity. It's not a luxury. Some of the things that we do for self-care can feel like really frivolous and decadent, but that's okay. Like having a self-care practice in itself, I don't think of that as a luxury. I think that that's a necessity. It's something that we all have a right to as human beings.
And it's interesting, I didn't hear about self-care until I became a mother and I started working. I was running a family daycare and one of the ladies who would come and check on me and make sure I was going okay as a new educator in my home would say, you've got a small baby, you're working full time, you're looking after 4 babies at a time, you need to look after yourself, you need to do self-care. And as a new mother, I'd gone from looking after myself and doing whatever I wanted to do to thinking that being a good mum was sacrificing myself and everything about myself to put my child 100% first. And I even said like, my child gets 100 and whatever percent of me and my husband gets like 0 and I get like 0. And someone said to me, that doesn't work out like mathematically, it's 100% and it has to be split up, And they said, you have to be at the top. You have to be the one that looks after yourself first so that you can give out to everyone else afterwards. And it took me a while, actually, probably up until the first birthday. Okay, probably until I got pregnant with the second one. I was about 15 months. She was about 15 months old when I got pregnant with the second one. I was like, okay, I really need to start looking into this self-care thing, because this is not going to be happening, me pregnant, looking after a toddler, me running off of nothing. So it's interesting because I probably would have looked at it as I'm not deserving. It is a bit decadent. I don't need to do that. That's not what a good mum does kind of thing, which isn't what it is. So why do so many mums struggle with self-care? I probably alluded to some of it, but let's hear, what you have to say on the topic.
I think a lot of us had a very similar experience to you, and I think it's so beautiful that you had someone telling you, no, look, it is important, and you should be putting yourself first, and the math doesn't add up. I love that. But I think there's a few different reasons, and one of them might be that when we have our babies and when we go into that kind of big hormonal mess that we become after having given birth, we aren't wired biologically to be thinking about ourselves. We've evolved to be completely focused on our babies. But as humans, we've also evolved, if you look at communities around the world, to be supported by our communities at that time when we've had our babies in that first few days, weeks, months after giving birth. Mothers are biologically hardwired to expect social support. So I think we don't have that impulse to look after ourselves. And from there, even as our babies get older, if we haven't made a practice of it, then it's not something that we're just going to kind of flip a switch one day and go, okay, time to look after myself. The baby can, fend for itself. And I think along with that is we've all been exposed to, at some point or another, to this patriarchal narrative of moms should just get on with it and let's kind of suck it up, let's bounce back. I'm sure a lot of us have heard this kind of language, even if it wasn't said directly to you.
I hear it all the time. It actually really upsets me, really upsets me, because I hear so many people around me in my village or my circle constantly saying it, it's, I don't know what it is. It's like, I don't want to hear it, so people just continue to say it to me, knowing that I don't agree with it. I heard it on the weekend, I just got on with it. I had no support. And I'm like, well,
did you saying it about themselves, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'm like, well, I didn't have any support either, but I've decided to, make sure that I do that for my children as they grow older, because I remember how hard it is. Well, I'm in it at the moment, you know what I mean? And I'm going to go the opposite way instead of, say, well, I didn't have it, so nobody else can have it, which it is that patriarchal viewpoint, I suppose. It's like women didn't have a choice. They just had to get on with it. This was what happened. This is what all the women did, and they burnt themselves out. I know, looking at my mother, she struggled, socially and burnt herself out as well. And so I guess as a child, I learned that I didn't want that to happen to me. And that reminds me all the time when I have these conversations with women and they say these things as well. It always reminds me this, I don't want that to be, happening to me. And I don't want that to be happening to other women. I want them to nourish themselves, look after themselves, love themselves, so that they can give themselves 100% or whatever it is to the people in their circle. And those people can give themselves, so that, it's like a beautiful community, isn't it, of nourishment, love, connection, support. And I guess it takes people like us to spread the message and make a difference. So I'm glad that you said that.
When I went to Vanuatu on holiday about a year ago, I was chatting with some of the women there about their traditions around the postnatal time. And even today, their postnatal traditions are still very strong. So they were talking to me about, we look after the new mother. One lady said the new mother's like a queen. She doesn't do anything except look after her baby, and she accepts all these gifts of food that people bring her. And I was curious if they had a specific time period, because many cultures have the 40 days, or in Indonesia, I think it's 21 days. And the lady I was talking to said, no, there's no specific time period that the new mother rests and is cared for by her community. It's just when she starts to feel like becoming more active. So I thought that was really interesting. And I just wonder how many women in kind of modern day Australia and the sort of social demographic that we come into contact with our clients, how many of those women are thinking to themselves, I deserve to be treated like a queen? It's probably not the narrative that they've got running in their brains.
No, definitely not. Hey, it's all about looking after the baby, and that comes with, every appointment that you go to after the baby's born. It's all about the baby. It's, how much is the baby putting on? Is the baby okay? Is the baby this? Is the baby that? And the mother just gets forgotten and left behind. And when the mother has the baby, everyone's, even friends and family, are always asking about the baby. It's the gifts that you get are for the baby. You get baby items, which feels really nice and decadent at the time, I will be honest, for me, my experience. But now, as I plan and, think about the future for my third child, after I've had, all this postpartum training, I'm not planning for the baby. I'm planning for myself. I'm going to have a woman's, what are they called, mother's blessing, and think of all the ways that I can support myself with, postpartum massage and having a postpartum doula. And it just sounds so amazing. And I wish I'd had that from the very beginning and the very start, because so much focus was on the baby and baby clothes and all of this stuff. And really, I needed to work on my mindset, which is part of self-care as well. So it's interesting that you talk about the women and the culture in Vanuatu. And you can see the same in Australia in the islander cultures and how much support the women get. And, it's beautiful. It's actually beautiful to watch.
That mindset piece that you mentioned, I think, is so important, because often underneath there's this belief of I'm not worth it, I don't deserve this. And it is a real mindset shift to go from I'm not worth it to building a self-care practice and making it part of your life.
Definitely. I agree with that. It can take a long time from that first seed being planted. The first time that someone said to me, you've got to look after yourself, to me actually getting to the point of taking it seriously. And it probably was till after my second baby was born. So 2 years when I was struggling and I was depleted and I was tired, and I started to think maybe this person was onto something. It's just that it was only one person giving me the message. There was no one else, no healthcare nurses or the doctors when I was going to the hospital. Nobody was reinforcing that. It was just, like, you've just got to survive this and get through it. So let's walk through. We know what self-care is. We know why many women struggle. Let's walk through how we can actually set up a self-care ritual that's going to be easy, for busy new mums or pregnant women who are tired, because it doesn't have to be difficult. It can be really simple, can't it?
It can. If it's difficult, then it just becomes another chore, and then you've just given yourself another job, and you don't need another job. You've probably already got 12 in between being a mom and all the other things that you do, right? So I like to think of it as, if self-care is a train, then it's running on 2 tracks. So one of the tracks is scheduled self-care, and the other track is something that I call reflective nurturing. So with scheduled self-care, with that track, those are the things that you literally schedule into your life. And I like to sit down with my calendar, and there are things that I do every day to look after myself and fill my cup. There are things that I do every week, and there are things that I do every month. And they're scheduled into my calendar. The daily one's not so much, because it's more just a practice that I know is going to happen, but weekly things are. And I think it's really important to schedule it in, because no one else is going to do it for you, because most of us aren't living in that kind of collaborative culture where there are other people looking after you, and you're giving, you're giving from your cup, but they're giving from their cup, and looking after each other. It is quite a different dynamic. So you need to be the one to schedule in those things. And maybe we should backtrack a little bit and talk more about what those things might actually look like for you. I think it's really helpful to brainstorm what are the things that really fill your cup, because it's so individual. And for me, a lot of what fills my cup is around spending time in nature, spending time alone, good quality time with friends, doing art, creating things, walking, running. So I try and schedule time that I'm going to be able to go for a bushwalk or go for a run every week. I aim for 3 times a week. If I don't get there, then, I try and move some things around and make it up in a different way. But for someone else, it might be something like going dancing, or, building something, or working on a project. It's very, very individual, and it starts with that self-awareness and knowing what really fills my cup, and also knowing what are the things that drain me, and how do I kind of counteract those things.
And it can be really small as well. So like obviously a mother who's just had a newborn baby isn't going to be going for runs or, getting as much time as we can with older children. But some things that made me really happy in my postpartum were like doing my nails. Like I got this gel kit, and I could it was really cool. So I was painting my nails and giving myself daily massages, meditating, so like putting on some relaxing music or something for my mood. I really love music myself. Reading a book, like how amazing is reading a book? And I even put in having a cup of coffee, because when you have a newborn baby, often you would go to make a cup of coffee or a cup of hot tea and you wouldn't get to it. So there are some ways that you can do that by getting like a cup with a lid on it, so it stays nice and hot, so then you can enjoy your cup of coffee. And it's not really like a treat because you do it every day, but you're mindful and you're, grateful for that cup of coffee. Whereas like before you had your child, you would have taken it for granted. There's some of my favorite ways to, especially when I had a newborn baby, to get some self-care in.
Yeah, and if you are pregnant, then I would say all of the kind of planning needs to happen beforehand, because once you've had your baby, you're not going to be functioning on the level to go, oh, I've had a cup of cold coffee for the last 3 days. I think I'm going to go and get a really nice thermos mug and feel it. Like, you're not going to get that far to even thinking about your own needs. But it's such an easy thing to do, to get a little thermos cup and just know that you're going to have hot coffee, you're going to have a hot tea, whatever you want throughout the day. And it's really important as well in those conversations and kind of laying the groundwork for a self-care practice for new moms, if they have a partner, to have conversations with the partner. If there's something that you need an extra pair of hands for, like if you want to be able to have a hot bath every night and listen to an audiobook or a podcast, you need your partner to be looking after the baby. So that needs to be scheduled into their life as well. Because if you make assumptions, or if you're waiting for someone else to offer and they never offer, that's a whacking big seed of resentment that you've just planted right in the middle of your relationship. And that will just continue to grow and grow and grow.
Yeah. I think it's so important to have those conversations pre-baby and try to lay out expectations for, everyone in your circle, but definitely your partner. And it's really hard to get that value over when, they don't understand. I remember having a conversation with my husband and being like, there's going to be so much washing once the baby's born. And he's like, it's only one baby. And then the baby was born. It was like 4 or 5 clothes a day because it was just everywhere. Yeah. And he's like, okay, there's a lot of clothes. And I was like, yeah, I told you. And, Yeah, I think just having those conversations, because at least when you got to that point, we had already had that conversation, but, you know, trying to understand that you're going to need some time. Like, I think when we really look into ourselves, we do know what it is that, you know, we want and what makes us happy. I think we already know that. So journaling and writing those things down also to really uncover what it is, and then constantly, you know, depending on your partner, you know, dropping little hints and, you know, having a conversation, but always reminding them, like, oh, you know, when the baby comes, you know, remember, I'm going to be having my bath every day and I'm going to be listening to music with my candles and my essential oils, and, you know, that's my time. And just don't plan that bath around the witching hour. Plan it earlier, you know, or later in the night when the baby's supposed to be sleeping.
Yeah, you might need to and kind of jig your schedule a little bit.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say around that is that for new mums, social support is so important, and sometimes it just feels like too hard to even reach out to a friend and say, hey, can you stop by, or I haven't seen you for a while, especially if your friends are maybe you know, busy with their own lives. Maybe they haven't had kids, or maybe they have had kids and so that's why they're busy. So build in some social connection. So, you know, rather than waiting until you want to see your friends, just say we're getting together, you know, once a month or once a week, and it's always that day. And if someone can't make it, they can't make it. But if you do that, like, for example, I have a couple of friends that I go out to dinner with once a month. And if one of us can't make it, that's okay, because the other one usually can still make it. And then I have book club that meets once a month. And again, it's just, you don't have to think about it. It's just always happening. That container is already there for you. You've got your safe space. And it really, really fills my cup to show up and, you know, walk away having connected with my friends and been able to get that support and to, you know, to give and take as well. So it's something that I've just gotten in the habit of doing, rather than sort of scheduling one-off social interactions. I have quite a lot of things scheduled into my calendar that just happen on a regular basis. And I think it's a great habit to get into when you're a new mom, but set it up when you're still pregnant, so that you know that you're going to have that regular interaction. Obviously, you know, people who do fill your cup.
Definitely. And you know, if even if it's not an actually getting out, because some people logistically, for me, that was logistically not going to happen after a cesarean, an unplanned cesarean, I should say. So for 6 weeks, I couldn't drive. And then for some reason, it just seemed like such a big effort to get out of the house. Like, it was so hard because the baby would poo, and then by the time it was like, oh, I'm too tired, I can't be bothered getting there. So even having that online support, or the online, you know, whether it's having Skype calls or, you know, just calls on the phone, but having that, you know, something pre-thought about beforehand. So we've really got down to the nuts and bolts of things. But how does a new mother know when her cup needs filling? You know, we don't want the mums to like hit rock bottom, be completely depleted. We want them to sort of see the warning signs. So how can they identify those warning signs?
I think there's a few different ways. Some people are really good at noticing what's going on internally. So if you're feeling depleted, if you're getting a little bit snappy with other people, if you're maybe tearful and you can't put your finger on why, those are all really good signs that your cup is running low and you need to refill it. If you're like me and you're not so great at noticing what's going on inside, often my husband will be the one to say, hey, you're acting like you might need a walk, like you need to go and spend some time in nature or something. So if you're like me and you don't notice what's going on and you're not in touch with your feelings as much, you might need to just sit down and look at your calendar and go, you know, do I have anything scheduled into my week that's filling my cup, or am I only doing things that are actually draining my cup, and kind of take an analytical approach to it. The other way to tell when your cup might be running a little bit low is if you think you're too busy to do something that fills your cup. So if you're, running around and you're like, oh, I was going to go for a walk today, or I was going to go and get a massage, but I'm going to have to cancel it because I'm too busy. That is just major red flag that actually you need to cancel something else and spend twice the amount of time that you were planning to on that self-care activity. We need to go back because we talked about one of the tracks of developing a self-care practice, but then the other thing that I wanted to say, so if scheduling self-care is the first track, the second track would be reflective nurturing. And that's more, it's a mindfulness practice really, but that is looking at what's draining your cup and then just reflecting that back to yourself. So what that looks like is if, say you're a mom and you're feeding your baby. Every time you sit down and you feed your baby, you check in with yourself. Am I thirsty? Am I hungry? If you're giving your baby a bath, that's your little reminder, check in with yourself. Am I feeling like I need to have a nice long bath, some other way to relax, or if your baby is enjoying the bath but you're not a bath person, you might schedule something else in. So just everything that you're giving out to someone else. When I go and do postnatal home visits with new mothers, I use this for myself. If I'm cooking for a new mother and I've been doing a lot of cooking for her and making her some really lovely nourishing meals, I just kind of have that little reminder, and then I'll go home and someone will cook something for me, or I might take myself out for a meal at a restaurant just to kind of refill that cup. And it's like a quick and dirty way, so you don't have to kind of always go back to your schedule, but of being a little bit more mindful and going, well, what am I putting out? Can I just reflect that back to myself? And it also helps you stay on top of the unexpected ups and downs, because sometimes we might have a busier week than we really planned. And so being aware that we are pouring more from our own cup is a good reminder that we need to then put that back in.
Yeah, no, that sounds really good. I think that's really great, being really mindful about, because as new mothers, we're giving so much. Like, new mothers give so much. They're basically like 100% responsible when they're alone, if their partner's back at work, for looking after this baby that constantly needs, you to look after them. They can't do anything. So whether they're teething or that, they're having, they're waking up every hour or 2 hours, the mother has to, it's a completely different change to what you were experiencing before you were pregnant. So that's really great to be mindful of those things. I have another question in regards to, what new mothers make, what mistakes new mothers make with self-care. Can you share a little bit on your take on that?
Yeah. Number one mistake is waiting until you feel like you need it. If you feel like you need it, then you're probably too depleted already. And so we've already talked about some strategies for scheduling self-care in and being more mindful of your day-to-day to ensure that you are getting that self-care before you actually need it. The second one I would say is shadow comforts that masquerade as self-care. And shadow comfort is a term coined by Jennifer Loudon. And what it means is something that you could do as self-care, but the way in which you're doing it actually isn't filling your cup, it's draining it. And a really good example of that is a lot of us like to relax at night with, say, a glass of wine and watch some Netflix, right? And that can be, a nice way of filling your cup and just relaxing from the day. If you are binge watching Netflix and, just constantly drinking wine, and it doesn't actually feel like it's filling your cup. It feels like you are numbing your emotions or blocking something out or avoiding something. That would be a shadow comfort.
And you can do that by, eating too many bad foods, overeating, you're just, I was listening to a podcast a little while ago and it was so amazing. It was like the way that you actually look after yourself and the way that you lose weight is by nourishing your body. And by, it doesn't mean that you can't eat certain foods. It just means that you don't eat a whole block of chocolate. You just have a couple pieces of chocolate. So you still get, what it is that you want, but you're not sitting in front of the TV eating a block of chocolate. And I had severe birth trauma when I had my second baby, and I was sleep deprived. I was constantly asking my husband to go out and get chocolate for me. And I don't really eat chocolate. Like, it's not something, I'm more of a savory person. So he was bringing home blocks of chocolate, and it was really just a way of me, dealing with the situation, what I'd just gone through, the sleep deprivation, the sugar. And I guess I became a bit addicted to sugar too, because I started drinking, sugar in my coffee and my tea. I've just stopped sugar in my coffee and tea 2 years later. And I put on 20 kilos in 1 year. So you can just imagine how much that, made me feel happy at the end of the year when I, woke up and realized what I'd been doing to myself. So yeah, definitely focusing more on things that are actually going to make you feel better, not worse at the end of the day. Otherwise, then you've got another problem that you have to deal with at the end of the day, and then it's just stretched out, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the third mistake that people make is the feeling that they have to earn it. You don't have to earn self-care. You have a right to time on your own. You have a right to feel nourished. You have a right to look after yourself and to expect your loved ones to look after you too. And I think that creating a self-care practice can be an act of courage. Brene Brown talks a lot about living deeply into our values. And for those of you who haven't heard of Brene Brown, she does a lot of research into things like shame and vulnerability and courage and compassion. And she talks a lot about living into our values. And I think if we can connect our self-care practice to our values, it can feel a lot more compelling. And you do realize that it is an act of courage to look after yourself first, because if we want to burn brightly, if we want to give deeply from ourselves, then we have to fill our own cup, because if it runs out, then we have nothing left to give. And what you have to give, what you have to offer the world is so much. But I cannot think of a single person who I know who's living deeply into their values who doesn't put their own self-care first, who doesn't prioritize looking after themselves. I cannot think of a single one.
Oh, it just made me a bit teary when you said that. I don't know why, but I just loved hearing you say that. And, living your life to your value is so important as well. Like knowing your values and surrounding yourself with people who, have similar values or, have similar walks of life, because being surrounded by people who, don't have the same values and you're constantly clashing over your core values. So one of mine is connection. So not surprisingly, but for me, it's being connected with my family. So I love to have one-on-one time with my children and my husband. I love to have deep connections with people, not surface connections. And another one of mine is integrity. So being around people who don't have integrity really breaks my soul. And so I used to look at myself and think, what is wrong with me? Why does this upset me so much? But when you understand your core values and what's important to you, and then you can set out a self care practice. So for example, I did a big mind map, a big brain dump of self-care. And I've always been taught that you work within your values. So your value is you, that your top value is always you. And then so you write me in the middle of this big piece of paper, and then everything that comes off your value, which is your family, your baby, your health, and then all of like little circles come off of that. So for my health, it's eating nourishing foods, exercising, mindset, looking after my mind, my dental hygiene, like all of these things that, are important, and then doing the same for everything else. Before you know it, you've got like a million different ways to, look after yourself and nourish yourself. And you don't even need to question what it is that you need to do, because it's all on this big piece of paper, and you know exactly what it is you want to do and what fills your cup in that. And just reminding me of that exercise that I'd done. I need to bring that paper out and put it on my wall, because the biggest thing in life that we need to remember is that we are our value, we are our core, and we need to look after ourselves so that we can give and explode our goodness and, happiness out into the world. But that hits the people that are closest to us, which is our partner and our children. Mm-hmm. And so when we're happy and we're filled up, we can give that back to our babies. And then we're teaching them to do the same. And then they do the same. And it's just a wonderful big circle of self-love. So your children are so blessed that you are doing self-care weekly. I know you do it because I speak to you all the time, and you're always like hiking or doing something really amazing. And I admire you so much. You're such an inspiration in that regard. And it's so nice to be connected to you, because, just talking to you, you're like, I'm doing this. And I'm like, well, she shouldn't be doing that. An older version of myself might be like, she's indulgent, she shouldn't be doing that. Just for anyone who has that sort of trigger that comes up for them. But now I'm like, oh, go girl. Like, I need to schedule in some time for myself. So it's a really good reminder being surrounded by people, who have the same values and, living the same life. So yeah, it's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's contagious, isn't it?
It is.
And that's interesting, because when you were talking about other people's, how we react to other people doing self-care, I think there's also that internal reaction. So for a lot of people, and for me too, often there is guilt coming in, which kind of is this massive roadblock. So I have a little antidote to guilt for people who might be feeling like they want to have more of a self-care practice, and they want to look after themselves more in their life, but that guilt keeps coming up. So the antidote to guilt is gratitude. Yeah.
Explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So the way that works in practice is, for example, I'll give you an example from my own life. On Tuesdays, I go to an art journaling group, and this is hugely important to me. It connects with one of my core values, which is the value of belonging. And it's a therapeutic group, so we do a lot of self-development, personal development work in there. However, the logistics can be a little bit crazy. Like sometimes I have to go pick up my partner from work, and he drops me off in the car, and then I might take a Sheba to get back home. My kids have to, get carted around. They have to come along for the drop off, or I might feed them dinner early. So I'm kind of messing my family around in order to get there, right? And there are times when my partner's actually left work early in order to facilitate me getting to my group, because he knows how important it is to me. These things are massive guilt triggers, right? Like I can look at that, and sometimes I do. I'm like, oh, I feel a little bit guilty. Like my kids just wanted to stay home, and they really needed a quiet afternoon after school, and I've dragged them out again to drop me off at art, and my partner's gone out of his way, and it's like I'm feeling so guilty about it. If I turn that around and go, I'm so grateful to my partner for facilitating this, for taking this seriously on my behalf. I'm so grateful to my kids for being so flexible and for just being cheerful about getting in the car. I'm just so grateful that this is possible for me in my life. Massive turnaround. It feels completely different. And it's now a beautiful thing. And I also feel more connected to my family when I turn that around like that. So that's another great little practice. If guilt is coming up for you around something, journal on that and try writing, instead of I feel guilty about this, I feel grateful to, my partner, my friend, my kids, whoever it is. I feel grateful to them for this. And it can really start to shift things.
I think that's wonderful. I think so many of us experience guilt and we give up things that are important to us because we feel guilty, or our partner might be having a really bad time and say something and we go, okay, well, it's too hard, or I'm not deserving, I'm not worthy. So you are worthy. Like, we are worthy of having our cups filled up. And I don't want any mother to have to put her self-care or any of her rituals on the back burner. I think that's such a wonderful exercise to turn it around, because at the end of the day, it is all about the mindset, isn't it? It's about, being able to turn it around into a positive and not allowing those negative little judgments coming in, which often coming from our subconscious, which aren't even part of our root, our value, our core value, but they come from what we've heard from society or people around us, which we don't even care about, but we allow them to take over. That's you've just shared so much wisdom and knowledge today. Like, I've learned a few things, and also I feel really inspired to input some of these things into my life as well. And I know that you also have a wonderful downloadable for self-care. So the viewers who are watching can download this beautiful freebie. Let me know about it.
Yeah, it's just a very simple little worksheet, very quick and easy to do. So the first part of it is I'm going to get you guys to brainstorm all of the things that you do or that you used to do in your life that fill your cup. And the second part of it is just a series of really practical questions and prompts to get you to the next point of scheduling some of those things into your life and making it really easy to put them into practice.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. It's a great follow-on from what we've just been talking about. It gives the viewers, an actionable step. So if you're watching this, make sure you download your freebie and, go through the steps. It's in the, it's easy to watch a video, but you need to take the time and write these things down so you can really work out what's going on for you. So thank you so much for coming on today, Antonia, and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you, Ashley. It's been so nice to chat with you.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks for watching this episode. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, our mailing list, and follow us on our social channels so you never miss an episode. All our details are listed in the description box in YouTube. I look forward to bringing you another great episode next week. Welcome to our circle of support, Mama, with the Motherhood Circle. See you next week. With love, Ashley.